Today we are looking at a case from the mid-20th century, so sit back as we go to Mexico. Gregorio Cárdenas Hernández was born in 1915 in Mexico City. He was one of 10 children, and his family had moved to Mexico's capital from the coastal city of Veracruz. His mother, Maria Vicente, was very protective of her son, as when Gregorio was born, he suffered from encephalitis, which is an inflammation of the active tissues of the brain, and caused him to suffer headaches. But when he started school, Maria Vicente became increasingly more worried about him. He displayed some strange behaviour, was bad-tempered, cruel to animals, and never seemed to feel empathy in any situation. He also suffered from wetting the bed and found it difficult to make friends. His childhood therefore became somewhat solitary. However, he was extremely clever, and despite being a quiet and introverted child, he was always an exceptional student. As he moved on to secondary school, he found it difficult to talk to girls, and when he was 15 years old, he started to visit prostitutes. He still wet the bed, and was worried that this may prevent him from having any serious relationships. However, he met a young lady named Sabina Lara Gonzalez, and soon after they married. Unfortunately, the marriage didn't last. Both Sabina and her mother said that they found Gregorio's behaviour rather strange, and Sabina was concerned that her husband wet the bed. There were also rumours that she had been seeing other men, and had told people about her husband's problems. Gregorio became very upset. He wondered why she would do this to him. He lost his respect for women, and began to harbour feelings of anger and hate. As he had always been such an outstanding student, he applied to study chemistry at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, which is known as UNAM. He thought that if he could study in such a prestigious university, he would be able to meet new people who wouldn't know about his past. His parents, however, were poor and unable to assist him with any of his expenses. Fortunately, he was offered a bursary by Mexican Petroleum, known as Pemex. The bursary was awarded due to his unparalleled talent, and the Pemex board hoped that once he finished his education, he would be a great asset for their company. Once he commenced his studies, his life seemed much better. Although surrounded by some of Mexico's most intelligent students, Gregorio's academic achievements were outstanding. He also tried to change. He had always been a shy and solitary young man, but as time passed, he purchased new clothes, dressed smartly, and although still quite quiet, he did appear to be more confident. With the generous bursary, he was able to rent a house in the neighbourhood of Tacuba, close to the historic city centre. The house was located at 20 Mar del Norte Street. It was only small, but close to the tram and not too far from the university campus. Although no longer an upmarket area, it was a nice place. Many of the buildings were built when the Spanish occupied the country, and the streets were adorned with inspiring architecture, typical of the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries. It had previously been the home of many Mexican and Spanish noble families, and at the beginning of the 17th century, the first Mexican emperor had lived there. By the time Gregorio arrived in Tacuba, the area had become less exclusive, as some of the large and beautiful houses had fallen into disrepair. Many had been divided into tenements, known typically as vecindades, some of which housed many families. It was now a more affordable area, and was the home of people from all walks of life, some rich, occupying the exclusive residences, but mostly poorer families. The house where Gregorio lived was not very big. It was on one level and had a small garden to the side. It had simple furniture, but a well-equipped laboratory for him to conduct his research. It also had a small library. Although Gregorio had gained more confidence, many people still thought of him as someone who was quite reserved. When his lectures finished, he would rarely go to the coffee houses to talk to the other students. He would instead return to his house, and when he felt lonely, he would seek the company of prostitutes. On Saturday the 15th of August 1942, he agreed the price with one named Maria de los Angeles Gonzalez. She was still a teenager and from a poor Mexican family. She used the money she received to assist with her studies and tried to improve her circumstances. Gregorio talked to her about his university course and about the Second World War, which had now been going on for 3 years. A few months earlier, 2 Mexican oil tankers had been sunk by German U-boats, and even though Mexico had not actively participated in the war, the country came out in support of the Allies. They supplied raw materials to the USA and sent hundreds and thousands of men to work on the US farms and railways. The war was something that Gregorio had taken great interest in, and he constantly followed the reports in the newspapers and on the radio. On Monday, the 17th of August, Gregorio went back to his lectures. On the 4th of September 1942, a gentleman named Manuel Arias Cordova and his wife were waiting for their daughter to return home. Her name was Graciela. She was 20 years old and a student of the Faculty of Chemistry at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Her last lesson finished at 8 p.m, so it wasn't uncommon for her to get home late, but never this late. Senor Arias Cordova tried to reassure his wife, but by the early hours of the morning, he too had become very worried. Graciela had never failed to return home before. She was a responsible, intelligent young lady and would always let her parents know what she was doing. At 8 a.m, she was still not home. So now, extremely anxious, Senor Arias Cordova went to the police station to report his daughter missing. The family are originally from the city of Morelia in the state of Michoacán and were from a wealthy and influential family. The police were very quick to try and trace the missing girl. Detectives were sent to the chemistry faculty at the university and began to question the students. It soon emerged that Graciela was a very friendly and popular student, and that Gregorio Cárdenas Hernández seemed to be somewhat infatuated with her. The detectives were told that he would follow her around the campus and wait for her when the lectures had finished. He had a car, so would sometimes offer her a lift home, but she never accepted. Graciela was always nice to him, but only ever considered him to be a fellow student and a friend. Recently, he had been following her around even more. The investigation was led by Detective Superintendents Jose Acosta and Ana Maria Durantes. They decided to search Gregorio's house and car, but they found no evidence that suggested he was responsible for Graciela's disappearance. While the police were looking for the missing student, Gregorio went to see his mother. He told her that he was in a terrible mental state and that he needed to be assessed and declared insane. Together they went to the clinic of Dr. Oneto Berenque. Gregorio's mother explained how her son had suffered as a child with encephalitis and had often expressed very strange behaviour. Gregorio told him that he had devised a chemical compound that made people invisible. He gave it to the doctor, but it was just a piece of chalk. Dr. Berenque conducted a detailed medical examination, but concluded that Gregorio was not insane and that his bizarre behaviour while in his clinic was just an act. When he asked Gregorio why he had done this, he replied that he had been implicated in the disappearance of one of his fellow students. Gregorio's mother, however, was still very concerned about her son's mental state and pleaded with the doctor to admit him to hospital. The doctor told her that he did not think it was possible. The deputy police chief questioned Gregorio again, but when asked if he knew of the whereabouts of Graciela, he remained silent. Superintendent Jose Acosta believed that Gregorio was the person responsible for the disappearance and decided to conduct another search at 20 Mal del Norte Street. When the detectives arrived, there was a lot of commotion. The neighbours were eager to talk to him, as there was a foul smell coming from the garden, and flies were everywhere. One neighbour said that he had noticed the soil in the garden had just been lifted, and that there was also a small hole. A detective went into the garden. He looked around and brushed the soil. As he looked closer, he could see a foot. The detective immediately stopped and sent for a forensic team. When they arrived, they proceeded to examine the area. Slowly, they removed the soil and unearthed the body of Graciela Arias Cordova. It was a macabre discovery. The disappearance of the popular 20-year-old had been reported in all the newspapers. She was the daughter of a criminal lawyer from a prominent family. It did not take long for the press to arrive, and as they gathered outside the house, passers-by stopped to see what was going on. Soon the very quiet and ordinary Mal del Norte streets had become a very busy and curious place. As the forensic team continued to search, they found another body, then another, then another. In total, the bodies of 4 young women were recovered. Gregorio Cárdenas Hernández was arrested and charged with murder. The other 3 victims were named as 16-year-old Maria de los Angeles González, who Gregorio had taken back to his house on the 15th of August, 16-year-old Raquel González León, and 16-year-old Rosa Reyes Quiros, all of whom worked as prostitutes. Gregorio, however, had already confessed to the crime to Dr. Oneto Berenque. The story was headline news across Mexico. People considered it incredible. How was it possible that one of the brightest chemistry students in the country could have done this? Gregorio was issued a formal prison order and was confined to the prison of Lecumberri. In the days that followed his arrest, his mood differed greatly. Sometimes he was able to speak with clarity, but on other occasions, he seemed incoherent. He was examined by many psychiatrists, some of whom disagreed with each other's diagnosis. Eventually, however, it was decided that he was insane and therefore not criminally responsible for his crimes. He was then transferred to La Castañeda Psychiatric Hospital. The story took another bizarre twist when months later, one of the named victims, Raquel González León, appeared alive and well. The police then tried to find out who the unidentified victim could be, but they were unsuccessful. While at the La Castañeda Psychiatric Hospital, Gregorio was given treatment and attended classes in the psychiatric clinic. He was also allowed access to the library. He became a model prisoner, which led to the authorities questioning his mental state. He was re-examined by experts, and once again, medical opinion was divided. Due to his exemplary behaviour, he was given more freedom than most other prisoners, and on Christmas Day 1947, along with a female prisoner, he escaped and travelled 460 kilometres to the city of Oaxaca. He stayed there for 20 days before being rearrested. A year later, on December the 22nd, 1948, he was transferred back to Lecumberri prison. Once there, he studied law and painted many pictures. The media who had been so against him when he was arrested, labelling him the Tacuba Strangler, had now become a medium for him to show all of Mexico that he had been rehabilitated and was sorry for what he had done. All he wanted to do was put the horrible part of his life behind him. The papers liked to release these stories, focusing on his studies and his artwork while in prison, as well as recount the events of September 1942, as now there was a whole new generation of readers. Many people became very interested in the story of Gregorio. He was affectionately referred to as Goyo, and with all the publicity, he was able to organise sales of crafts made by the prison inmates. He would also receive visitors, including many women. One regular visitor was a lady named Gerarda Valdez, and after a while, Gregorio married her. They went on to have 5 children together. On the 8th of September 1976, Gregorio was released from prison and pardoned by President Luis Echeverria. He was invited by Mario Moya, the Secretary of the Interior, to give a speech in the Congress of the Union. Here he was celebrated as a great example of someone who had been rehabilitated by the prison system. Due to his notoriety, he was able to open an exhibition of his paintings, many of which he sold. He finished his law studies and graduated from university in 1985. Following this, he worked as a lawyer. His story has been written about many times, and films and theatre productions have been made about him. Gregorio Cárdenas Hernández died on the 2nd of August 1999, aged 84. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for watching. I would like to thank Maria Estela Santillan Gomez for recommending this story. Please leave any feedback or comments you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case.